How's it going? Happy Friday. This is the last of our cases on the campaign finance stuff. Citizens United versus FEC. Ideally, you should have completed the assignment about Citizens United before you watch this. So if you haven't done that yet, why don't you go ahead and do that now? I'll wait. Great. Now that that's out of the way, let's review what the case is about. Um, You saw in that assignment there's a 90-minute feature film called Hillary the Movie. It's available on demand, on DVD, and they're also running commercials for you to buy the film or go pay for it on video on demand. So the question is whether or not that speech, both the commercial and the film itself, whether BICRA was intended to apply to either the commercial or the movie itself, both or neither, or just above all that, whether or not speech should face restrictions simply because of the corporate or union identity of the speaker. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Um, the idea that they're basically saying if the speech comes from one of those two entities, it's going to be restricted before it's even been made. Um, Often the case gets misrepresented in the media and among politicians. It gets misrepresented as whether or not corporations are people and whether corporations should get First Amendment rights. But if you listen to the hour-long oral arguments or if you read the opinion, that's not really at issue in the case. And so you'll often hear it discussed in those terms, whether corporations are people, but that's really not what the case is about. It's about whether or not the corporate identity of the speaker means that there's something about the speech that should lend itself to restriction. And so I think it's Justice Scalia who uses this terminology. What you basically have with the Hillary movie situation is a speaker, in the Citizens United group who made the film, a speaker who wants to speak a message, a hearer who wants to hear it, the people who want to buy it on video on demand, and yet the government saying those two can't talk to each other. And the idea here that the speech from corporations or unions is so inherently bad that it has to be restricted before we even know what the message is. Just by the nature of being a corporation or being a union, there's something about that speech that means they are prohibited from making the film in those 60 days before the election. Again, remember, they are able to use their PACs to do that. Okay, if Citizens United wanted to create a PAC and raise that money in limited $5,000 hard money increments, they can. But their argument is that method is so cumbersome that they shouldn't have to do it. So the ruling is, in a 5-4 decision, that those restrictions should be lifted. And so the result is that now corporations and unions are able to use their general treasury funds. They don't have to use the PACs. They're able to just take whatever their profits are, whatever cash on hand they have, and use that to make political ads. They can do it at basically any point in time. So essentially, you have a return to the kind of the Buckley era, when those independent expenditures were unregulated, they could basically do anything they wanted in those ads, essentially advocating for or against candidates. But corporations have found kind of a new mechanism to do this. What they've also decided is that they don't always want their names out there. So, like, you don't want to see Walmart is responsible for the content of this advertising. They're concerned about the impact that would have on profits. So corporations who want to be able to fund these things have to find a way to do it kind of behind the scenes. And so that's what we'll take a look at right now. This was probably 2011. There was an issue on the ballot. It was Senate Bill 5, and then it turned into issue 2 on the ballot, and it was whether or not public employees could form unions. And it was a huge issue in Ohio. And I was getting 2 or 3 of these kinds of mailers on a daily basis. These are two of the nicer ones that you would get. I got a lot of them that were just, things like Obama and his liberal allies want you to vote yes on or no on to. And I was getting a flood of these like every day. And usually I just take them and put them right in the trash. But, getting two or three of them a day, I was like, all right, I'm going to do the responsible thing here, figure out who are these people. So I'd look on the flyers, and it was the Alliance for America's Future paid for these ads. So like, all right, I'm going to go online, and this is 2011, so I'm going to use Internet Explorer. I'm going to find out who these people are. So I go to the site, allianceforamericasfuture.org, type it in. Okay, here's our mission, pretty vague. We're dedicated to educating and advocating sound policy. Okay, yeah, great. But who are they really? So I'm gonna click on their spot over here for more. Okay, nothing over here. I'll click on the, nope, can't click on that. Click on, So this is it. This is the entire site. There is no other information other than this main page of nothingness. Welcome to spending on elections in the post-Citizens United era, where anonymity reigns and you don't get to find out who is making commercials. The biggest reasons for that is a new entity called super PACs. So remember our regular PACs, our regular political action committees. Regular ones were set up by corporations or unions, and they were legally allowed to not only create ads, but PACs are allowed to contribute directly to candidates. Corporations can't, but their PACs can. Unions can't, but their PACs can. Why? Because PACs use hard money. $5,000 from individuals, $5,000 only to each candidate, disclosed. All right, cool. In the post-Citizens United era, we have super PACs. All right, they are organizations that can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money making independent expenditures. And we remember from the Buckley decision, independent expenditures, so long as they don't coordinate with the campaign, they can basically advocate for candidates, and they can do so with soft money. They still can't contribute money to a candidate. That's still no-go. And so here's kind of the way that they're set up. They use provisions in the tax code in order to set up their organization. And so initially, some of the super PACs were set up as what are called 501c4 organizations. They're just a part of the tax code. It's how you create organizations. 501c4s are allowed to engage in political activity, but they are not allowed to, the people who contribute to a C4 don't get a tax write-off, and the organization has to disclose the sources of their funding. But they're allowed to engage in political activity. And so, like Karl Rove is the name of a guy who created one of the first super PACs. It was called Crossroads. And he was a former Bush advisor. He's a Republican strategist. And so he set up one of the first ones of these because they're allowed to engage in political activity. Cool. But the problem is, obviously, having to disclose the sources of your funding. And people who are looking to spend billions of dollars influencing elections don't always want their names out there. And so what they quickly found is that there are separate organizations, 501c3s. If you contribute to a 501c3, you remain anonymous, and you get a tax write-off. And the money that a 501c3 brings in, they don't have to pay taxes on that. These are like churches. Your church is a C3. Okay, but here's the problem. Those organizations aren't allowed to engage in political activity. So what to do? Well, what they found out is you can do both. They set up Crossroads GPS as a 501c3. So the C3 raises unlimited amounts of anonymous money, don't pay taxes on it, tax write-off for the contributors. Then the C3 gives money to the C4 in one lump sum. And so what happens is the C4, Crossroads, will then say at the end of their advertising, they'll make this terrible ad, and then they'll say at the end, Crossroads GPS was responsible, or Crossroads is responsible for the content of this advertising. And when you would go on opensecrets.org, or when you would look at the FEC's website and see who gave them money, it's just one organization, Crossroads GPS. So the C3 is set up to collect the funds, And then they give the money to the C4, who then engages in the political activity. And when they disclose the information, all they're disclosing is that the other super PAC is the one who gave them the money. And so the end result of all this stuff is that lots and lots of anonymous money, unlimited amounts of money, are being raised and spent on independent expenditures. And so if you didn't like wealthy individuals influencing elections, then you probably weren't happy with the Citizens United decision, because it's kind of a free-for-all now. It's a lot tougher to limit the amount of money being spent. It's a lot tougher to know who those individuals are. Now, the opposite view is this allows more unfettered free speech. It allows for the best ideas to win in the competition of those ideas in the marketplace. I do think Scalia had a point, like the idea that there's something so inherently bad about corporate speech, like before we've even seen what it is kind of ridiculous. And in the case of the Hillary movie specifically, the idea that you have people who want to say something, people who want to hear it, but the government saying you're not allowed to do that, it's kind of the antithesis of the political speech that the First Amendment is intended to protect. So I think you can see the outcome of this case both ways, and I think that that's why it's a 5-4 decision. But certainly the impact has been lots more anonymous money spent, and it's gotten harder and harder to stop the influence of a wealthy few. And that's on both sides of the aisle. Like, this tends to get painted as a more Republican issue, and certainly there are lots of wealthy Republican donors, but there are tons of wealthy Democrat donors as well. And so I don't know if there's as much of a party breakdown on this. Maybe I think Republicans like it because they have more wealthy donors across the board, but there are certainly tons of Democrat billionaires. We saw it in the presidential primaries this year. There are tons of billionaire Democrats as well. So I think this is maybe more of a wealthy folks influencing the election versus regular folks who maybe don't have as much power to do so. I wish we were still in class, because we would take about a day talking about this. Stephen Colbert, in the back when he had his show, in the post-Citizens United era, was trying to kind of explain what was going on to his viewers. And so he goes about creating his own super PAC, literally just called Colbert Super PAC. And their slogan was, "Making a better tomorrow, tomorrow." And there were tons of videos. I would show you this whole thing. I don't want to just send it to you because there's lots of stuff that I had to skip through in these videos. But he files the paperwork to request a super PAC. He then wants to talk about this on his show, but he realizes that he could get in trouble promoting his super PAC on Viacom, and Viacom would perhaps have to disclose, that they're making contributions by letting him talk about it. Then he realizes he can get a media exemption, just like NBC or CNN. You can talk about politics as a media entity and not be considered contributing to those campaigns. So he files a request for a media exemption. He actually has to hire an attorney for all this because it's so complex, and his attorney is the former chairman of the FEC, Trevor Potter, so that makes it even better. He wins FEC approval, and so he starts raising some money. If you look down here, he's got more than $1 million to spend, and this is in the lead up to the 2012 election. This is a great line down here. So this is like legit. He creates a super PAC, and viewers send in money. He has more than $1 million to spend, and he then realizes he can set up the anonymous money. So he starts actually making ads in Iowa and South Carolina. So in this one, he urges people to vote for Rick Perry, but to write in a vote for Rick Perry. You'll see.
A storm is gathering over Iowa. A money storm. Out-of-state groups like Hero PAC and Jobs for Iowa PAC are flooding the Iowa airwaves, telling you to vote Rick Perry at the Ames straw poll. They think they can buy your vote with their unlimited super PAC money. But Americans for a Better Tomorrow ask, What about our unlimited super PAC money? We want you to vote for Rick Perry too, but not their Rick Perry. Our Rick Perry.